Name's Bill Milam. I'm going to moderate this panel, which consists of sitting here and listening to the speaker, and then perhaps judging who gets to ask him the questions and trying to choose the best ones, the easy ones for him, although I probably won't be able to do that. I've never been able to do it for myself. But I must say, this morning was a very, very interesting session. I mean, this whole subject lends itself to puns like food for thought during the morning and so forth. But the one that I really want to mention is that when I arrived 5 minutes late this morning, there was no food left outside. And I thought, now this is real food insecurity here. And we've almost run out of food out there again. So we have run out of food out there again. So the food security is spreading, actually. But I think we're all pretty well fed here, and both intellectually from this morning's sessions, which I thought were just excellent, and we're about to hear from a speaker that I've been waiting to hear, Suleri, whose bio is in here. You must have it, and Abid Suleri, and he is the only thing I have to add to that. Two things, really. First, he has a PhD in food security from the University of Greenwich, which evidently this isn't mentioned in here. And secondly, that I've known of his institute and of him for a long time, waiting anxiously to hear about him. The third thing I will say is that this morning's sessions, I thought, lead up to this address really well, because we had the macro-level challenges to food security. Now we're going to hear about the social dimensions, and if anything, if there was any sort of main point I took from this morning's sessions, is that the social dimension is really the critical one in this issue in Pakistan. And so we're going to hear about that. And then I think this afternoon's session, which I shouldn't say much about because I'm not involved in it, but this will then take on a more micro side, the human side of food security, which is, of course, perhaps the most important in many ways. But with all of that, that's about all I'm going to say, and I'm going to introduce Abid Suleri, who will talk to you on the social dimensions of food security.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's always difficult to be a speaker during lunch or after lunch. Most of the people, they have already got food for thought as well as food for stomach, and sometimes it becomes difficult to be attentive. What I would try to do is just to bridge what has been said in the first session and what ought to be said in the next session in the humanitarian dimension of food insecurity or food security. And let me avail this opportunity to thank the panelists for the first session, because they set the tone very right, the macro context, the broader picture of Pakistan, the agriculture and food security. And now we have to look at the social dimensions of food insecurity. Now, it is said that the world is facing a 3F crisis, food, fiscal, and fuel. I just added 2 more Fs for Pakistan. Fourth F is functional democracy, or the governance, about which Roshan has already very elaborated us. And the fifth one is the frontier crisis, war and terrorism and all the things that are going on in our Northwest Frontier province. So these are the 5 Fs around which I'll be trying to just share my thoughts with you, and how they somehow make our social context in which we are food secure or we are food insecure. And by the way, there is this broader 6th F as well that I haven't properly named yet. It is the climate change, fragility of climate. But I won't touch this 6th F today. I'll be mainly focusing on the first 5 Fs. Now, when we talk of food security, and this Saadia Toor, she I think rightly mentioned that it's food security or the state security and vis-a-vis human rights. There are quite a few levels of security that one can think of when we talk of food security, individual security. as an individual, I have a right to food. And this is what in Article 38 of the Constitution of Pakistan, it is the responsibility of the state. Then there is this national security. Then there is this regional security, the Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, the whole region, it's sort of troubled, and we need to think of its security as well. Then there is this global security, the heat and the threat that American policymakers sitting thousands of miles away from that region, they are facing, or the Europeans they are facing. Of course, it's again a huge global issue. Now, when we sort of prioritize these securities, one thing that we often forget, or we tend to forget, that we think that they are mutually exclusive. I think they are not mutually exclusive. Rather, they are interconnected and they are cumulative. And their interconnectedness make it difficult to address the security of state if security at one of the other levels has been compromised. Let me tell you how. For example, the security, national versus food security. When ex-President Musharraf, he was writing in his book, In the Line of Fire, and you can find it on the back cover of the book, that we have earned millions by handing over suspect terrorists to USA. So where does this $1 million they went? Of course, if and I need not to repeat what has been said in the first session, but if it didn't go towards the sort of alleviation or reduction of sufferings of common man, then obviously this is the question that is being asked there again and again, that okay, so what if we were an ally state with America for last 10 years now, but where does it lead us if we are not food secure? And this is very genuine question from the stakeholders. Even when you talk of all the bounties of millions that previous government or this government has been claiming by arresting those suspects, but then what? The question is then what? Does this money is actually getting translated into social development for an ordinary Pakistani? And if it is not, this is where the lack of trust comes between an ordinary citizen of Pakistan and the government of Pakistan and the international community. Now, let me give you this example, this individual hunger. If I'm hungry, if my food security is being compromised, perhaps I would be least bothered if I'm living in an atomic power, an atomic state or not, because the state security is really not my issue. My issue is if I am able to get the 2 breads, the 2 square meals in time or not. And if I'm not getting those meals, of course, the state security is irrelevant to me. Now, how this state, which is very secure otherwise, and even if it doesn't have got any external aggression or external threats, it becomes so fragile and so poor, as Roshan was saying, that it is number 9th in the failing state index. So how does it become? Because when this individual hunger is there, there will be social instability. And this social instability, that would put the state security on threat, because there is no external threat at the moment. That would be the internal threat, and it would be the hungry people, the people who are deprived of their food, who are marginalized. They will definitely question, and they will definitely put the whole writ of government at question. And when this state gets weakened, this is where the regional and extra-regional involvement it starts beginning, because it has very right or wrong repercussions for the regional neighbors as well as for the international community. Now, the major concern that U.S. policymakers they have today is that what if Pakistan's atomic assets, the nuclear assets, they get owned by these militants, and it is a huge threat. So if there is this political instability, definitely there will be involvement of the external actors, either the American drones or whatever measures they would be taking, but that would certainly be there. Now, when state cannot provide food, when it cannot provide health, when it cannot provide education and justice to everyone, then what happens? The picture here, it is a police station established by Taliban, and in Urdu it says Taliban station. We are always there to serve you. So it means that there is a state within state. So if state is not able to somehow deliver the services that it is obliged to do, then there will be state within state, and there will be parallel mechanisms. We were discussing in towards the end of the previous session the alternative education system, madrasa. Now, why these are the madrasas for? Because there is no fee. They provide free food, they provide free clothing, they provide free shelter, and in many cases they also provide some sort of stipend to the parents who are sending their children to these madrasas. And on top of it, it is a short route to heaven. So obviously, again, it is the state failure because state is not able to provide the traditional education. State is not able to take care of the education system, or if it is there, it is expensive. The parents, they can't afford it, or they can't afford to relieve one earning hand to sending them to school unless they are compensated for it. And madrasas, they are doing so. So if they are doing so, definitely then there is this alternative system that is there. And no wonder then the militarization, it's somehow you see a spread of militarization in the society. Now, the food security ranking, about which Roshan also talked, SDPI and World Food Program, we did this ranking in 120 districts at that time, back in 2003, 2004. And we did this ranking with the primary data as well as with the help of secondary data, measuring the 3 pillars of food security: the physical availability, the socio-economic access, food absorption, for which the safe drinking water and health indicators, those were taken, and the infant mortality. And we ranked 120 districts of Pakistan. And what we saw that the compromised security at one level, at food security level, it compromises security at each of the other levels. This is the picture that emerged with this, I think, some technological fault. You can't see the colors very right, but the first 3 rows, extremely insecure, very insecure, and less insecure, it somehow revealed in 2004, and the data we collected that was from 1998 till 2003. It was at least 3 years before this September 11, and it showed us that 50 million people, making up 52% of total rural population, in 80 districts, they were food insecure. Today, the figure has jumped up. Now there are 77 million people which are food insecure. And we are talking of rural poverty at the moment, where in a context where there is subsistence farming is there, where they are produced locally. We're not talking of the urban consumers. So it is the rural producers who are food insecure. Now, what does it mean in the societal context? And basically, and again, you can't see the colors here. But this area, the dark brown was extremely food insecure areas. And you can see the districts bordering Afghanistan, they are chronically they are food insecure. Then this place, Dera Bukti, and I'll discuss the districts in my next slides. These are the worst 13 food insecure districts, and I'm sure most of you would be familiar with some of the names. Tharparkar is desert, which is, of course, it ought to be the worst food secure. It is this region. The second one is Dera Bukti. Dera Bukti is the place from where the natural gas is being supplied to rest of the Pakistan since 1964. And there the Baloch freedom fighter and national leader Akbar Bukti was assassinated 4 years ago because he was anti-Musharraf government and he was demanding the gas royalty that was due to the province Balochistan. And can you imagine that was the practically most food insecure district after Tharparkar. As I said, Tharparkar is a desert. So one doesn't wonder if it was food insecure. But Dera Bukti is, you're providing the main energy source to rest of the Pakistan. And it is the second most food insecure district. Then there was North Waziristan, where there's a lot of trouble going on. Then the Musa Khel, Kharan, Shangla. Shangla is again in the Swat Valley. Then Kohistan, it is Dir and Upper Dir. Then South Waziristan, Dayamir, Hangu, Bolan, Upper Dir, Khyber. So you name it. And when you talk of this quote-unquote axis of evil within Pakistan, you find that those are extremely food insecure areas. And not now, it is not something that happened overnight. It is that they are chronic food insecure district. As I said, that this compilation was made back in 5 years ago and based on the previous 5 years data. Now, what is happening there, that if you have to look at the priority setting, individual security, national security, regional security versus global security, you will find that people, they are committing suicides there. And I'm not talking of suicide bombers. I'm talking of people committing suicides. You will find news reports where people, they are abandoning their children because they are not able to afford them. You will find news items where people from those areas, they are coming and they are putting their small toddlers and children for sale. They come and they appear on any TV channel and they say, we want to sell our daughter or we want to sell our sons. Now, in that particular context, and if one has to really die of hunger, then why not to be recruited as a suicide bomber? And this is again something that we need to find out when we talk of the root cause of all these suicide attacks. There was last month of the Interior Minister, they disclosed the cost of one suicide bomber, how much a suicide bomber is potentially earns, because they arrested some 2B suicide bombers, and when they interviewed them, mainly from that area, it is $12,000, 1 million rupees. So it's 1 million rupees assured money that is offered to them, to any potential suicide bomber. The payment is made in advance to the family, and it is promised that they will take care of the family members, they will take care of their well-being, they will take care of everything, and all they have to do is to just wear a jacket with the explosive material in it and try to enter in a potential target area. So again, we need to see that what is the root cause of that militarization that is very often branded as Islamic militarization, that is very often branded as religious militarization. Again, if you look at the Lal Mosque tragedy that happened 2 years ago, now the 95% of the students in the Lal Mosque, they were from these districts. And basically, they were just sort of on a scholarship or on a fellowship where from these remote areas, they were there in Islamabad, in the capital of country, and they were getting their religious education as well as, of course, then all other motive, whatever the motives were, and the government at that time, initially they were also supporting them. They were declaring them their strategic assets, and that's why they were able to get all this ammunition in their mosque, and then they gave real tough time to the government of Pakistan. So again, in the priority setting, one need to see that what are our priorities, or what are the priorities of government in that case. Now, what my thesis is that the food person and security, food individual and security, they are somehow linked with an iron triangle. So food scarcity, it heightens the potential for conflict over it, which translates into a security threat. We are also talk of mullah Marxist nexus, and again, if you look at these districts, what I propose and what I say that there are many types of militants. One is that you may say that these are Islamic hardliners trying to promote the Saudi version of Islam, the Wahhabism in Pakistan. They are, of course, one of major segment. The second type of militants, they are anti-government. Those who kidnapped John Suleri in Balochistan, and you have to really differentiate between the militants in NWFP and militants in Balochistan. While in NWFP they are more religious, in Balochistan they were always secular. They were always inclined towards left, and the Russian influence was always there. So they were always leftist. So now if they are kidnapping John Suleri, the regional head of UNHCR in Pakistan, they are not kidnapping it because they want to go to heaven. They are kidnapping it because they wanted to, and when they released it, they openly declared that they just wanted to highlight the miseries of their province because they were not able to get the gas royalty from the federal government, and all this because Pakistan is a federation of 4 confederating units. And of course, this issue of political, provincial autonomy as well as the equitable distribution of those resources among provinces, it's a huge issue. So these are anti-government people. And then the third is the class conflict. And this class conflict again becomes very apparent if you follow the news reports. When the Taliban, when they captured Bonir is one of the districts about 80 kilometers away from Islamabad, what did they do? The first thing they did, they captured one of the 4-story houses in Bonir. They declared it as their district headquarters. The house owners, he was a big Malik. He had about 5 or 6 petrol pumps, the garage stations. They captured his garage, gas stations. Then they captured his business. And this is what they have been doing wherever they go. So again, with these Islamic people, with these anti-government people, there are a lot of potential supporters who find it an extremely easy way to take revenge from local influentials, be it parliamentarian, be it their local Malik, be it their political agent. And as happens in such sort of riots and such sort of coups, wherever they capture the attack, the first thing they do, they loot ATM machines, they do robbery with the jeweler's shop, they loot all the businesses, so they capture all the properties, even they captured the emerald mines in Swat, and they, in a very Robin Hood style, they started distributing the shares of that mine among the mine workers itself. So basically, it was again a class conflict between the haves and have-not. Then if you look at, again, another area, and that is the southern Punjab area of this sort of area, Rahim Yar Khan, Bahawalpur, Rajanpur, Now, Bahawalpur is a place where Jaish Muhammad is there. The head of Jaish Muhammad, he got released from India when this Afghan plane was hijacked. The Indian planes was hijacked and took to Afghanistan back in late 90s, and he got released. And since then, he was sitting there in Bahawalpur, in the southern Punjab, establishing his own state within state, again the madrasas. And one of the address that is told, the sermon that is very often preached in these madrasas is that this worldly material is useless, the worldly wealth is somehow that takes you to sin. So it's better to sacrifice all the worldly benefits and think of the life after, the heaven. And because, of course, those people they are representing and then trying to attract the support and sympathies of those who have not. And even if there are many examples where the people who are rich, who were in their words not very practicing Muslim, they also joined their ranks and they let their properties and they let their assets, they just simply contributed it to the charity or to the madrasa. So again, this is happening, and this is what I call mullah Marxist within that social context. Now, what happens that this individual cases of relative hunger, when they turn into collective deprivation and gets an identity, this thing is extremely important, that when this individual deprivation, when it gets an identity, be it a provincial identity, be it on the basis of creed, be it on the basis of gender, class, nationality, it always leads to class conflict and ultimately to violence. And this is what happens. Now, these ladies, this picture is from Karachi, and they were trying to buy the subsidized flour from the utility store that was being run by the government of Pakistan. And you can see the number of ladies queuing up. It's a mob of ladies who are trying to, and the store people, they had to somehow close their gates to prevent this looting of wheat flour, and they had the money in hand and they're trying to get the subsidized wheat flour. Again, this photograph is from one of the internally displaced camp, where again the food is being distributed in Mardan and they're queuing up there trying to get their share. Now, if these sort of individual cases are there, and when they will get an identity, when they will find that Balochis are not getting enough, the Sindhis are not getting enough, the Punjabis are not getting enough, Sunnis are not getting enough, of course there will be class conflict, and it is extremely difficult to stop that sort of conflict then. Again, to elaborate further, what happens that food insecurity or food scarcity, it somehow provokes extraordinary behavior within individuals. And when this extraordinary behavior, in these individuals behaving extraordinarily, when they join together, come together in large numbers, they can put the whole political system in jeopardy. This is the political instability in the national state. The writ of national state is gone, and that is when rest of the international community, they start looking at that particular place as a source of global insecurity. And again, the source is, this is a rag picker child who is trying to, all they do is to go through all the filth and all the waste material, try to find something to eat. Of course, it is an extremely extraordinary behavior that these individuals they have got. And when they come together, and whenever there is, because it's already on a boiling point, so any little trigger can put this whole system into jeopardy. Again, now coming back to this IDP issues, the internally displaced people. So while there are securing national and regional and global security, what we are doing, we are displacing people from their homes. Of course, the war that is being fought in Swat and in Fatah, it's not a guerrilla war. It is full-fledged war over there. And so far, almost 3 million people they have got internally displaced. And this is only 25% of them, they are in the IDP camps. Rest of them, they are with the local hosting communities at the moment. But even which are in the camps, this is a photograph from a Jalozai camp. This is again a photograph from Mardan camp. And these are the people. So food security of all of them is at risk. So what will happen, there are two major issues that they are facing at the moment. One is scorching heat. Swat was at a higher altitude, and obviously it was always with a very moderate and very pleasant temperature. Now these people, they are here in Mardan, which is a lowland area. 2 weeks ago when we visited there to make some assessment, the outside temperature outside these tents, it was 43 degrees Celsius. And when we measured the temperature inside the tents, where there were 12 persons, mainly ladies and the children, they were sitting there, the temperature was 53 degrees Celsius. Now, most of those ladies, those were wearing the tropical clothes because when they left their houses, they were in a very moderate, pleasant sort of climate. Now they are in the scorching heat. So they have their heavy clothes on, and then they have their burqas and their chadars on. And of course, this is the worst sort of misery that can happen to any of the human being. One can cope with the winter. One can keep on putting more and more covers. But of course, with the summer, it is extremely difficult. And then again, when they're food insecure, when we tried interacting with the community members, many of them who otherwise they were a bit, of course, offended by Taliban, and they were saying that they used to threaten us to send the elderly son or one of the members to join their ranks. They were saying that we were much better off in Taliban regime. At least we had our house, we had some food to eat, and we were not at the miseries where we are sort of converted like beggars. Now in Pakhtun Valley culture, of course, the women, they are always dignified, and you try to always treat them with some sort of dignity in public. Of course, there are social issues where they are not considered equal, or they are asked to observe parda and everything, but the women's respect is always there. And this is the biggest sort of challenge for any Pakhtun, to let his or her daughter sit in the queue and try to somehow seek food for the rest of the family members. Again, this is extremely shocking, and this is what this is whole social dimension of food insecurity it can lead to. And one always wonders that what would happen if among these 3 million, even if 10% of them they decided to be anti-government and join the ranks of the militants, you will simply not be able to control them. And this mob is actually increasing. 3 weeks ago, when Mr. Zardari, when he went back from Washington, I think he made a classical blunder when he declared that the next phase of this action would be in North Waziristan and South Waziristan. I don't know what purpose it fulfilled, because those who wanted to capture, they have already left the area, getting it from the president's mouth. Of course, they have already fled the place. And then this further internal displacement has started. The people who were there, sitting over there, when they heard that president is announcing that the next phase would be in North Waziristan and South Waziristan, they have already started migrating towards these plain areas, vacating their houses. And I think it is an extra burden and extra pressure that the government of Pakistan has to cope. Now, within all this context, if you look at the priorities in public spending, of course, the priorities in public spending, they are more towards achieving national security. If you look at the current expenditure, and it's available, the current expenditure of Pakistan are available. If you Google it, you will find the current expenditure for last 10 years or 20 years. Historically, what I used to call them, there are 4 Ds. 1 quarter of the current expenditure is simply on defense. The 2nd quarter is on debt retirement, debt payment. The 3rd quarter is on day-to-day administration. And the 4th quarter is for the social development and the public sector development. Now, what happens, of course, when People's Party government, before coming into power, it was a part of their manifesto that they would somehow reduce this defense budget. But with this Swat operation going on, of course, the national security issue, it would be extremely difficult. Rather, the budget that is going to be presented, federal budget on 13th of June, everyone is expecting that the defense expenditure, they would go even higher. And it is very logical. The operation, it's a war that is going on over there. The government, they can't reduce their defense expenditure. They can't reduce their debt repayment, and especially after seeking this loan from IMF last year, the external debts, they have increased manifold, and you have to retire them. So, of course, debt repayment would remain there. Day-to-day administration, we have one of the largest cabinets in the world. All the ministers with portfolios and minister without portfolios and special assistant, it's more than a century, more than 100 persons who are there sitting with the status of ministers. No, of course, all of them, their expenditures are there, and then we are bifurcating the ministries simply to please our coalition partners. There is a new ministry which is never mentioned in the constitution, because of Ministry of Livestock. Now, livestock is a provincial subject, and you can't have a Ministry of Livestock at federal level, but there is a federal minister for livestock who is sitting there. Of course, you need more portfolios to somehow accommodate all these ministers. So those would be there. So the brunt would be on social sector development. Last year, the social sector development, out of total budget, it was almost 400 billion rupees. It is 80 rupees per US dollar. So there were 400 billion rupees, and the PSGP was cut by 150 billion rupees. So And the rest of 250 billion rupees, those were not, there was simply no absorbing capacity. So now in this current budget making, many of the ministry, they are surrendering their budget because they were not able to utilize it. The health ministry, they surrendered 34% of their budget. Can you imagine that in Pakistan, the health ministry, the federal health ministry, they are not able to absorb what was allocated. On one hand, we keep on saying that there are very little resources. On the other hand, whatever is there, we are not able to absorb it, either because of delayed payments due to the budgetary constraint and the fiscal flow. The payments, they were not made in time. In the first 6 months of the last financial year, from June to December, there was absolutely very little payment that was released to the allied department. And whatever was released, those were not able to spend them. Now, in this war-like scenario, of course, it would be again difficult to focus on public sector development, which means creating more inequalities, which means creating more hunger, which means reducing subsidies, and which means, of course, putting these people, making an easy prey for the militant forces. Now, to conclude, what I think that we need to change our paradigm. Hunger issue is a security threat, and we shouldn't consider it as merely a humanitarian concern. And this change paradigm, if we consider it as a security threat, national security threat, or other global security threat, it would get more resources being channeled to improve food security, and we will be able to avoid political destabilization and conflict. This paradigm shift, it will also turn the pain of hunger in countries like Pakistan into opportunity for social transformation, for better awareness about their rights, for women empowerment, for girls' education, for adult education, and exposure to a secular face of world. Now, we had been dying for access to people in FATA, both the national actors as well as the international communities. USAID had put millions of dollars for FATA capacity development program and FATA development programs. ADB was trying to do it. World Bank was trying to do it. Government of Pakistan was trying to do it. Now consider, I think this is a very good opportunity to turn this challenge of IDPs into an opportunity. You can never have that easy access to all the women from FATA, to all the children from FATA who needs to be immunized, who need to be vaccinated. All of them, they're sitting in 2 districts of NWFP. All one has to do is to simply piggyback the humanitarian phase with social development phase and start giving them vaccinations in the camps or wherever the registration is taking place. We have been talking of safe motherhood trainings and the nourishment plans for the mothers over there. And all of us, we knew that it is extremely difficult, either due to security concerns or due to cultural taboos, to have access to the women. Women are sitting over there now, and those will be there for at least next 6 months to 2 years. This is just a very reserved estimate. It may prolong more than 2 years, but the minimum stay is 6 months. The maximum one wonders how long it would be. So there is an excellent opportunity to engage those women, to provide them adult education. There is an excellent opportunity to provide the students who were previously going to madrasas, to provide them traditional education, provide them maybe innovative education, more secular education. There is an opportunity to engage all the civil servants who are getting salaries after their displacement. They're sitting in the camps, asking them to report at a particular place and start all the capacity building programs that you want to do. So instead of turning them into beggars, simply waiting for the dole and simply waiting for the food aid, I think the best approach is to that all sort of social development plans are there, because we don't have any budgetary allocation for them. It's absolutely not possible for government of Pakistan to undertake it. And if the government of Pakistan would not do it, they would again become an international security threat. And obviously you would have to deal, especially the audience sitting in Washington, they would have to deal with all sort of problems that are piggybacked with this sort of social sector non-development. Now, if we are ensuring that their food security and we are providing them socio-economic access to food as well as food absorption capacity, of course, we are trying to handle their individual problems. Now, international community, I think they should start investing in developing the social and human capital. And as I said, that this would not only aid the harmed because of their forced evacuation, but also go some way towards fostering a more stable environment. The major actor combining relief with development should have been various USAID projects. Unfortunately, or interestingly, none of them is visible in any relief camp, either due to security concerns or due to some of the political repercussions or due to the heads of accounts that they can't spend in any other head of account, whatever was proposed. But I think that USAID projects these are the multi-million project. Empowering Pakistan job is empowering Pakistan agriculture, empowering Pakistan livelihood, empowering Pakistan firm. The procurements are the call for these requests for procurement, RFP and RFAs. They are here over the last 2 years now. And obviously, many of these funds, they can be channelized, part of this multi-million dollar toward the social sector development effort for individual rather than the state. Because if you provide the government of Pakistan as a budgetary grant, most of it would be consumed for the national security anyway, which is, again, I wouldn't debate it. It is logical. The war that is going on, it is make or break. So, of course, the government is, it's for the very first time, one can see that Pakistan Army and paramilitary forces, they are committed to tackle the menace of militarization in Pakistan after a long wait. So if they are there, of course, they would keep on increasing their defense budget. But who will take care of these social issues? Similarly, UN agencies, I think they need to play their role more active. Due to the security threat, Pakistan is declared as now Category 3 country, non-family station for UN agencies. Now, most of the UN agencies, due to security reason, they have scaled down their operations in those areas. And I think this is where I will lead to the next session. I'm sure that the wrap-up World Food Program would try to highlight this thing. I think UN agencies, they need to operate by following the model of as they were operating in other conflict-hit areas, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Somalia. There were many more conflict-hit areas where UN was very active. Now these UN agencies, including World Food Program, WHO, FAO, UNICEF, IFAD, they are playing a very active role in those IDPs, in the camps, the UNICEF, in tackling the issues of those displaced people. All they need to do is perhaps simply expand wherever the opportunities are. They have already got their funds there. So they have to work in more proactive way actually to tackle this security situation. I deliberately didn't touch the gender dimension of food insecurity with the patriarchy. Of course, this issue has already been discussed in the first panel. And but when we talk of social dimensions of food insecurity, I think this is extremely important. Intra-household level food insecurity, that needs to be thought of and that needs to be discussed. The whole issue of land acquisition. Saadia said it was 1 million hectare. It is 6 million hectare that the government of Pakistan has put for this corporate farming in the road shows in Middle East 2 weeks ago. And so it's 6 million hectare of land. If you want to privatize, you want to give it to the corporate agriculture business houses, why not to think of these land reforms? Why not to think of women rights to land? So I think these are some of the issues that we need to really discuss and consider if we want to control this whole menace from individual food insecurity to the global food insecurity. I will conclude with this presentation. This photograph has always inspired me. This old man that was arrested by the police, he was one of the main actors in judicial revival movement. You can see he was at least 70 plus of his age, very weak person, malnourished. But in all this people movement, he used to be at the front line, and he used to get arrested, and then he used to throw him out. But what the point I'm trying to make, that it's not the atom bombs, but it's the courage of conscientious individuals that is required to bring a social change, and we need to invest in our social development. I'll stop here and would be more than happy to take your comments or feedback.
Well, to continue the food metaphor, we promised you a rich presentation, and we got a very rich presentation, and not a drop of sugar in it. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to ask the first question because some of the things you said really set me off on some thoughts. You mentioned the sort of, what was it, mullah Marxist nexus, you called it? And I was very struck by what the Taliban were reported to be doing in Swat, which was throwing out the landowners and dividing up, or I guess dividing up the land, or maybe taking it for themselves, I'm not sure. But I wanted to ask you, when you talked to the IDPs in the camps that have come out of SWAT, the IDPs that have come out of SWAT, is your feeling, because, and I'll have to digress here to tell you that I was the unfortunate recipient, among many others, I assume, of a video which showed the Taliban beheading people, which would not have helped me eat lunch had I received it today. But did they cite Taliban things that the Taliban did that drove them out, or things that the army did? I mean, who's to blame here for the exodus?
Well, basically, I think they were putting the blame on both sides. On one hand, they were saying that the Taliban, they were pressurizing them and forcing them to at least give one adult member from each family to join their ranks. Otherwise, or alternatively, they were asking for a compensation ranging from 50,000 rupees to 100,000 rupees per family if they don't want to recruit one of the adult persons in their ranks. And on the other hand, they were putting a blame on army, that army was somehow keeping quiet. The political administration over there, the political agent, they were keeping quiet when all of this was happening. And when you talk to army, they put all the blame on the politicians. They used to say that, yes, we were very committed to curb them, but then there was peace deals. And this peace deal, it used to provide them an opportunity to regather their ranks, to again re-establish them and attack all the informers in the community. So it is, I think it is a very messy situation where everyone has to take the onus of this situation. You simply can't say that either it's Taliban or it's government or it's the international community.
Well, yeah. There's a lot of onus to be shared,
yeah.
I'm sure. But so it was the Army's inaction,
yeah,
rather than the Army's action, which was pretty destructive, that they blamed. That's a very interesting point. Now, let me open it up to questions, but first let me suggest that because, not because of this room, your normal instinct would be to get up and talk in this room because the acoustics are excellent. However, we are being webcast, I think, and we need to talk into a microphone, and I believe that we have people around here. There she is with a microphone. So after I have recognized you, when you get to your feet, if you want to, wait for the mic to appear in front of your face. Who wants to go first?
I think it would be nice if the speaker would address the audience in responding to the question by standing.
Sure, I will. That's what I'll do. Yeah.
It's up to him, really.
Yeah.
I mean, he may be tired. I'm tired. Okay, who wants to ask a question first? Nobody. Oh. Okay, Stan. Now just wait for a minute. Don't be too anxious. Where are you going?
Oh, I'm
this
sorry.
is
Sorry.
Wrong Stan. Sorry.
You equate, as one of your last sentences, hunger is a security threat. And I get from this that you're implying that hunger would generate potential extremist behavior. And yet, every study that's ever been done of extremists have shown that they tend to be educated middle class. How do you reconcile those 2 points?
If you look at the marginalized class, of course, those would be more hungry. Now, of course, if most of the studies, if they reveal that it is uneducated class, so they are more marginalized, their opportunities for earning a decent livelihood, they are extremely reduced, or due to their social identity, either they are forced to be marginalized or they are already marginalized. And so, of course, the trigger, they can be very easy prey to this sort of militancy.
Can I ask, Stan, I think that, you know, if you talk about the 19 hijackers that did the 9/11 atrocities, they were educated middle or upper class people, but the cannon fodder in South Asia, particularly in Pakistan and Afghanistan, I think comes from the more deprived classes. That's my impression, at least.
The Harvard study of extremists, and they tend to be educated middle class.
Well, I don't think that. I think that study is either out of date or you probably,
maybe they need to go to
got it
Pakistan.
wrong. You know, yeah. They need maybe
Collect some primary data over there.
Thank you. I agree with that. Okay, next question. Oh my God, look at all the questions. The lady here.
Okay, just a brief response to the previous question.
Excuse me, I
I'm
forget
Ellen
to ask
Messer.
people
I'm Ellen
to
Messer,
introduce
and I'm
themselves.
from George Washington University.
Thank you.
And just a response there, I think you're talking about extremists, and I think the Pakistan situation and others were talking about in what circumstances can extreme political views attract large numbers of followers. So I think we're talking there about social movements. But the question I wanted to get to build on your talk and get you to expand certain areas that you didn't have time to expand on, you do suggest that there are two really sets of opportunities that you laid out for us for new investments, which actually go along with the comprehensive framework for action that was developed by the UN Task Force on Hunger last year. And one of those is in the humanitarian realm, where you're saying that it should be possible to piggyback on certain efforts that are already going on, USAID-funded efforts to address the problems in some of the tribal areas and also in SWAT, and that you're suggesting there should be some piggybacking going on there. And I just open the question whether piggybacking in some cases can simply overload a system that's already pretty stressed. But on the other issue, which you at the end raised the question of whether some of the land that's suddenly being found to be opened to investment from the private corporate sector, principally in the Middle East, whether some of that could instead be turned over to, say, women's farming interests. What are the steps that it would take? Can you just outline those steps? So the first question is about overload, which you may decide to deflect to your later colleagues from World Food Program, but the other is just what steps would it take?
Well, the first thing first, perhaps if you look at any sort of disaster coping mechanism, you will find that there is an excellent, if not very poorly coordinated, but excellent collaboration between private sector and government sector, the non-governmental actors as well as the governmental actors over there. And I think this is a time when we can build our trust between the funding agencies, the local community organization or the national organization, and the government of Pakistan, because all of them, they are working there in the camps. And as I said, that they're very poorly coordinated. But if there can be a program, for example, many of the national NGOs who are working on health or who are working on education or who are working on any other particular area, safe drinking water, those can be linked with the UN agencies or with the USAID program. And those can be coordinated with this ERA or this National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, or the special group that Prime Minister has created to take care of the displaced people over there. So it is quite doable. Yes, it would overload, but it would overload if only one agency takes the onus to deliver it. If it is many agencies that are trying to do it, then perhaps all it requires is coordination. Your second question about this land reforms, I think it is again a big question that if the 6 million hectare of land is being privatized, and it's even not to the Gulf countries, the data that SGPI we collected for the land acquisition, we found out all the major politicians who has got this land in the guise of corporate farming, either the sugar mafia, even General Hamid Gul, the former ISI chief, he has got his daughter, Uzma Gul, she has got almost 500 hectares of land in previous government and Musharraf government. So if all of it is there, I think, again, we need to focus on digitalization of land record. If we want to, IMF is pressing hard for bringing agriculture sector into tax net. And this wouldn't deliver if we can't establish the land ownership. So I think land reforms, they need to be done either under the pressure of IMF or due to the social security perspective, because otherwise you will not be able to bring that agriculture sector into tax net, which is really needed.
All right, now a question from this side. Gentleman right here in the blue shirt, gray hair. I didn't mean to mention your age.
I actually color that here. Doctor, these are really painful photographs that you showed of these refugee camps, and you described the temperature perhaps on the inside as 50 degrees centigrade. Well, I would suspect in about 4 months it's going to be below 0 degrees centigrade. Now, these camps are going to be semi-permanent, I have to believe, through the winter. Where will the World Health Organization, Doctors Without Borders, people who now are going to have to start looking at epidemics and et cetera, now is the time to start bringing those resources in. Is security such a concern that these health communities can't move in en masse and begin to plan for the next winter?
Well, I think security assessment, as I said, that we need to think of the ways to interact there as we are already, when I say we mean, for example, WHO, they need to think that how they were engaging in Afghanistan or in Iraq or in Somalia, in Congo, in Liberia. So it's not that UN agencies, they can't perform in these conflict zones. Of course they do. But if the security is such a big issue, then we have plenty of Pakistani doctors over there. Those can be either called on a voluntarily basis, or those can be temporarily recruited to deliver in those areas. So I don't think that it would be a difficult challenge. But you are very right, scabies is already there. So there is an outbreak of scabies. There is an outbreak of quite a few gastro problems, including diarrhea, because the water is not safe to drink there. And with this high temperature, it becomes even more difficult. And you are very right that in winter it will be very harsh weather, again very harsh weather over there. So we need to think that what can be the permanent solution. And as I said, that I don't foresee that these people, they can go back in near future. On Friday, they showed some video footage by ISPR, the Pakistan Army's inter-services public relationship. They showed some footage of Swat Valley, and all the physical infrastructure has very badly damaged. So even if you control this militant element with this physical infrastructure damage, those people, they won't be able to go back. So we need to think on some long-term engagement. Otherwise, these who are over there sitting with the local communities or whatever, there would be a threshold point when the local communities, they would reach their saturation point, and the conflict between displaced people and the local communities over resources, over jobs, over a lot of other things, those would start emerging, and that would be another social evil. And then, of course, these marginalized and neglected people. We have many slums and many these makeshift camps of Afghan refugees in Islamabad. Anytime something happens in Islamabad, the first raid by police, Islamabad police, is on those camps. And many times they actually arrest the culprits from those camps, because with these people, if they are marginalized, if they have nothing else to do, they would wait for a certain period of time, and then they will start resorting for the shortcuts. Not all of them, but some of them, and which would put a bad name to all of the community. And I think this is the point that we need to ponder, and we need to wonder before it arises.
I see a hand way back in the corner there. No, I was the lady right there in the...
He's been raising his hand.
Well, everybody's been raising their hand.
I have a question. I'm raising my hand for him. That's why.
Oh, how nice. I wish I had help like that.
My name is Walid Khan, and my question is about the paradigm shift you talked about. Like the situation in Pakistan is related to conflict, and the reasons for that conflict, the extremism or terrorism, it's like I partly agree with the argument that poverty and food insecurity has to play some role in that conflict or that extremism. But if you just go around and ask everyone in this room that if they need food, are they going to kill someone? I think most of them would say no. So what's the problem over there that they are willing to kill people to get money or to get food? It's now a big question. The problem over there is that they believe that there's some part of people who should be killed or who can be killed. That's a major factor, that they are willing to kill people. Killing infidels or killing people who help out infidels, the bias against Christianity or Judaism, that plays a big role. I'm from the region. I belong to a minority community, and like I was born in internally displaced family, so I can understand what I went through and what I felt in that environment. So the paradigm you are talking about, those people who are displaced are obviously, we need to help them, but they need more help in terms of the belief set that they have been raised with, or which the government is sponsoring, or which the local religious elites are sponsoring. The ideology of jihad, ideology of killing people, I think that's the paradigm shift that we need in that region that would put an end to this conflict.
Is this a question or a statement?
It was a comment. Now my question is that you're talking about paradigm shift for food security or end to this conflict. Is there anything that would focus on this kind of paradigm shift that would put an end to a lot of problems in that region?
Thank you, Walid. I partly agree with what you said. As I told you, some of the causes of militancy, it's not only hunger. Of course, it's Islamic hardliners are there, and anti-government sentiments are there, and street gangsters are also there. The conflict between haves and have-not is also there. So we can't have a linear relationship between one cause and effect. But the paradigm shift that I'm trying to tell you, this always intrigues me. This data, as I mentioned, that this we collected, the secondary data as well as some primary data back in 2002 and 2003, much before, and the secondary data, it started from 1998, much before September 11. And if, according to that data, if North Waziristan was then a chronic poverty hit and food insecure region, if South Waziristan was then one of the marginalized place, if Dera Bukti was then one of the marginalized place, so it means that there are elements. I don't have an empirical evidence to say that this was the only thing that somehow triggered the violence there or militancy there. But these things, these districts, I think they are very clearly telling you part of the story. That part of the story is that if you ignore this food insecurity, if you just take it as a humanitarian crisis, or if you're just willing to help them when everything exceeds the maximum absorbing limit, then it would be too late. And the paradigm shift, what I'm telling that perhaps we should act before it is too late, before this hunger spreads in rest of the Pakistan. Of course, in this room, no one would be willing to kill if they are hungry. But within this room, would anyone would be willing to abandon their children? Would anyone would be willing to sell their children? Would anyone would be willing to commit suicide? And these things, these are not just rhetorics. These are reported in the media and showed on TV on a very regular basis. Even in cities like Islamabad, in Apara, there was this gentleman who committed suicide because he was not able to arrange dowry for his sisters. So when frustration reaches to that level, then of course those become very vulnerable. Rather, I would say that those are sort of psychologically challenged people who become very vulnerable. And then if they can take resort in religion or if they can take resort in anything else, they would do it. So we need to think, put ourselves in their setup. You are very fortunate and lucky that you are sitting here in Washington. If you had to be there, perhaps the level of thinking could have been totally different.
He says he came here 6 months ago.
Even then he's lucky.
Okay, who else wants to ask a question? And let's have a little transparency. If you want to raise your hand so somebody else can ask a question, raise both hands, please. Otherwise, if I see one hand, I'll assume you want to ask the question. So who wants, do I see any more hands? There's the lady back in the corner.
I'm Lois Tett. I'm a freelance writer and activist. Something you said about classism, whether or not one can be rich or poor and still be an extremist. I think they can. If you look at the example of the Bible, if that means anything to you, there were rich and poor all through there, but they did some heinous things. Just the other day, a Pakistan man was beheaded and then crucified because he accosted a young boy and killed him and killed his father. The question is, do you see much of that? Because I don't think that it's a classism. Do you see much of something like what I said? Because the people of the Muslim are governed by the Shura. That's an awful law, but it can be biblical as well.
I need to understand the question proper.
I didn't understand the question. How could
I couldn't follow your question proper. If you can maybe repeat it or maybe summarize it.
I
So
said
it is the heinous punishments.
the heinous punishment about the crucifixion. And first they beheaded this guy because he abused the boy and killed the boy. Then he killed the boy's father. They really wanted to make an example. Just this week I read it in the paper. They cut his head off, then they crucified him so everybody could see it. and not ever do anything like it. Pakistan. I believe it's
And that happened in Swat?
I'm sorry, Saudi Arabia. He's telling me, he's correcting me, thank you.
Well, we'll do another issue.
That is
Do
their
another meeting
no,
on that.
actually, that is their version of Islam. And as I said, that in Pakistan, majority of the people they are not followers of that version of Islam. So in Islam, there are many versions, and of course, one of the reasons.
Go ahead, Suleri. Finish your statement.
Sure. Well, one of the reasons that our military intelligence agencies, they were not very active in culminating this menace, it was partly Saudi Arabia. We had very friendly relations with Saudi Arabia, and we didn't want to offend Saudi Arabia. And so, of course, it's a Saudi version of Islam, and there can be difference of opinion on it.
Yeah, relations with Saudi are kind of ambiguous, I think. So, but anyway, speaking of ambiguity, it's 2 o'clock, and therefore we have to. Is it 2 o'clock? We have to go into the next session. So I think we won't entertain any more questions, and I didn't see a lot of hands up anyway. So I want to ask you again to pay tribute and thank our speaker.